Hi everyone, and welcome to the Stitch Sessions. This week we're diving back into our 2020 series, The Year of the Bride. It's February and it's still quite chilly out there, and so we have decided to work on a beautiful, lovely stole for the bride. So some people call this a wrap, a stole. This is made out of this beautiful, lush baby blanket yarn by Bernat, and it is so warm and so cushy. It just looks divine. And here you'll notice it on our beautiful model, Miss Katrina, who herself has gotten married in the past few months, and you may have seen her modeling our January Bridal capelet. And so she was nice enough to model a few more of our items here. So the February wrap sits nicely just around the shoulders. We've added this gorgeous little touch of this faux fur yarn that just adds a great little detail, and we've used our ribbon again for our closure, and it cinches up nicely in the center. Still allows you to be able to see the beauty of the dress, and it doesn't impede with hair or anything like that. Again, it depends on if the bride is wearing a veil or a headpiece of some kind, but you're actually going to be amazed, and I know I say this every week, but you're going to be amazed at actually how easy this is to make. And it doesn't take too long, but it is just gorgeous, and it's a wonderful add-on to any February bride's attire. So let's get started. Okay guys, here we go. I am so excited to dig into this beautiful yarn. I just love this color. And I'm using the Bernat Baby Blanket Dappled. And this is a ball, this is a 300 gram ball, which should be plenty for what we're doing. And the color is Ever After Pink, which I think is so appropriate. So I chose the pink again, just because I thought it was a nice little offset color that if you are outdoors and over the dress, most brides wear white. This would just give you a really pretty hint of a pink hue. So it's got this kind of ombre effect, and it's just so delicious. I can't wait to get into it. So this is what I'm using. And for this project or any project, make sure you always have a pair of scissors on hand and a darning needle. At some point, you're going to need to sew in some ends. And for this particular project, I am using an 8mm hook, also known as an L or an 11. Okay, so just a few things about making this wrap. So I am not actually I'll just use this. I'm not an artist by any stretch of the imagination. But what we want to do is we are going to be working across your back. So if this is your neck and these are your shoulders. So essentially what we want to do is we want to start off with a row that goes from the shoulder to just about your elbows. Okay, and so then we are going to be working widthwise all the way across the back. So that's the first part. These are what are going to fold across your front. So I just kind of crudely drew this here. So this is the front, and that's why we want to do a little bit of a decreasing effect here, just so that it clasps in the front. I haven't quite decided yet what I'm going to do for the closure. I may get a really nice clasp or button, or we might do a tie effect with maybe a pom-pom or something. It depends on my mood and how I'm feeling. And then at the end, we'll do a little bit of an edging just for a little added detail. Because this yarn is quite bulky, it can be tricky to create texture that's not overwhelming, especially for a dainty project like this bridal winter wrap. So I think adding a little edging detail at the end will just make it come across really, really nicely. So I'm going to start with a foundation chain row that will measure the length of my crook of my elbow here, where your so right about there, where your arm bends, all the way up to the shoulder. Now I don't want to go up above the shoulder here because with the trim that we're going to be putting on after, that will kind of come up around the bend so that it will sit on your shoulder. So we don't want to go quite that high just yet. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, so you just want to make sure that you pull out your yarn here. I like pulling from the center. So we will begin with a slip knot. And because this is a bulkier yarn and I'm using a larger hook, I just try to keep my tension nice and even. I'm not per se a tight crocheter, but I'm also not extremely loose. I just try to keep things nice and even. So for me, I know that the chain length I need that runs from my elbow to my shoulder is 20 chains. So I'm going to start off by chaining 20. Once I've chained 20, I just want to make sure that it's sitting nice and even and it's not twisted. And you'll notice too that with this, the baby blanket yarn, it can be a little bit tricky to see your stitches. So if you are brand new, and you fall in love with this yarn, which often happens, just really be patient with yourself, and over time you'll learn to kind of feel where your stitches are. So I can kind of see based on the texture here where my chain stitches are. Okay, so once you have the number of chains that you need, in my case it's 20, I'm going to chain 2 more. And this is going to help me create the height of my first double crochet. So this is fairly simple project in that we only have 2 stitches we're going to use. We're going to use the double crochet and we're going to use a single crochet. So once you've chained an additional 2, you want to find the 4th chain from your hook. So I have 1, 2, 3, and this is the 4th one. So the reason why we're finding the 4th one is because the 2 additional plus the 3rd one that was already there, that will count as a full double crochet stitch. So we're now going to work a proper double crochet stitch into the 4th chain from the hook, and we're going to do that all the way across. So at the end, you will still have 20 stitches. You'll have 20 double crochets. So we yarn over and into that 4th chain, just snuggle it in there, and we're going to pull through so that we have 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through the first 2, yarn over, and pull through the second 2. So you'll have something that looks like this, which doesn't look like much of anything, but this little bend here, that's our chain 3, that will count as 1, and don't worry that it's curving up. As we work further rows, that will straighten itself out. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to do a double crochet into the very next row and into the next stitch and each stitch across. So this is where it's going to take some patience. So I can see that's where I've just worked that first double crochet. So now I need to find the next one, and don't be afraid to pull your work apart a little bit here. So that's my next stitch here. So I've yarned over, I'm going to insert, pull through, yarn over, pull through the first 2, yarn over and pull through the last 2 to resolve it like a regular double crochet stitch. So now you've got 2. Okay, so that's what we're going to do all the way across. So you're going to definitely want to stop, pause the video, take your time, find your stitches. So there I am there. And because this first row is really important, you don't want to miss stitches. You don't want to put 2 stitches into 1 because that's going to cause your work to ripple and bunch up. So the first row, the foundation row, is always the most important to get us started on a good foundation for your project. Okay, so you can see I've done a few here. And so now your work is looking a little something like that. So work 1 into each stitch all the way across, and at the end you should still have, in my case, 20 stitches. So I will have 20 double crochets, including that chain 3 we started off with. Okay, so I'll meet you at the end of row 1. I'm just coming up to my very last stitch here. So this is stitch 20. So your work will look something like this. And as you can see, I probably still chained my chains a little bit too tight. Just because you can see it's just slightly bunching a little bit, and I'm hoping that that's going to straighten out as we go along. So this is row 1, is a row of double crochet stitches. So it creates this really pretty little ripple throughout it, a little texture here. So we're going to move on to row 2, and row 2 and 3 will be the same. We're going to chain 1 and turn our work. And again, when we chain, let's make sure to remember to keep it nice and relaxed, okay? So it's, again, this yarn may be a little trickier to see, but you might think that this is your very first stitch here, which technically it is, but this is the base of our chain 1, okay? Or it's the bottom of that stitch. Let me just undo that because I just feel like that was a bit tight. So I'm just gonna loosen this a little bit and chain 1, because this chain 1 is going to count as a single crochet stitch. So when I turn my work, I'm actually not going to work into this very first stitch here because it is the base or the bottom of what this stitch is representing, okay, which is the single crochet. So for row 2, we're going to do single crochet stitches. So into the very next stitch, which should be a little easier to find now, I'm going to do a single crochet. So we're not going to yarn over. We're just going to insert our hook, yarn over to pull through. Only 2 loops will be on your hook. You'll yarn over and pull through 2. And I'm very conscientious, especially this first stitch I work in, not to pull that chain 1 because it starts to snuggle in and then it bunches up our work. Okay, so just stay nice and relaxed. So for row 2, I'm just going to do 1 single crochet all the way across into each stitch. And again, I will have 20 stitches. So what the pattern is here is 1 row of double crochet stitches and then 2 rows of single crochet stitches. And then we're just going to repeat row 1, 2, and 3 all the way across our back. See, pretty simple. It's a great way to practice your basic stitches and create something really, really pretty. So go ahead and work this to the end of your row. And I'll meet you again just at the end to remind you about the loose chaining. Okay, so I'll meet you at the end of row 2 of single crochet stitches. So I'm just coming up to the end here. Now this is where we're going to come across that initial chain 3 we did at the beginning of the previous row. So I know it's going to be a little tricky. You want to try your best not to work into the space, which would be the easiest thing to do. Thing is, when you do that, see how I do that? It creates this ridge here and then your edges don't stay quite nicely, nice and straight, which we want. So I'm just going to do that. And so you want to just take your time and feel your way. Sometimes I actually turn it over, see? Then I can see it a little better. So I can see this little V here. That's the top of my chain 3 right there. So I'm going to insert my hook there. If I can get more than 1 loop, I try to, but if not, I just want to make sure I'm at the top of that chain 3 scenario, and I don't know. There we go. So then I'll pull through, again, keeping it a little bit looser because we're at the end, and resolving that single crochet. So you can see a little bit, it's a bit straighter on the edge. Okay, so now you have something that looks like this. These are our double crochets. These are our single crochets. You may not see it as well on camera. So I'm going to turn around. So technically this is the front right now. So you can see the effect of the double crochets, and then this is the back of the single crochets. Now some people, if you understand like what is the front and what is the back of your work, if you're a little bit more experienced, you might say, well, why don't you do 3 rows of single crochets to bring you back to the front? and then your double crochet row will stand out again like this. You can certainly do that, but I am pretty happy with making this reversible on either side. So some rows of your double crochet stitches will show the texture at the front, and the next time we do a double crochet, we'll see the texture of what it looks like in the back. So I like the idea of showing both the back and the front of the stitches, if that makes sense, to create more texture using a yarn that's hard to create texture in. Now, if you're a super beginner and all of that sounded like mumbo jumbo to you, don't worry about it at all. Okay, so we're just going to continue on. So we've finished row 2. We're now going to go to row 3, which is the same as row 2, but I just wanted to go over it again on making sure that we keep a nice relaxed loop, chain 1 in a very relaxed fashion so that creates a little bit of height there. We'll turn our work. And remember that we're not going to go into this very first stitch here because that's the base of that stitch. So when I say the base, it means this is what kind of the stitch is sitting on. So we don't want to work into that same stitch because it'll create an increased number of stitches. So we're going to go over to the next stitch, which is right beside it, and we're going to work a single crochet stitch again. And again, I try to keep it really relaxed so that this side, see, it's actually coming out nice and even, okay? And then I just repeat what we did in row 2, and that is 1 single crochet into each stitch all the way across to the very end. So row 2 and row 3 are the same. Okay, so this is my 19th stitch. And so now I have to find that chain 1. So it's a little bit looser, as you can see. I just want to make sure. So this is the actual chain 1 here, okay? So I'm just going to insert my hook there, pull through again, keeping it relaxed, yarn over and pull through. Okay, and as you can see, yeah, the edge is coming out nice and even. So right now you're probably going to notice there's a little bit of buckling. Again, I probably could have chained that first set of chains a little bit looser. In fact, what I would recommend is when you do your chain, your foundation chain, perhaps go up to a size 9 or 10 millimeter hook just so that it remains a little bit looser, because as you can see, once I worked the double crochets in there, it just kind of crowds in there, but I'm still pretty happy with how it came out here. So you can see 1 row of double crochets. Now the next 2 rows were single crochets, so they sit a little bit tighter. So now we're going to go up to row 1, and that's all you're going to do until you get the length that goes across your back. And so we're starting here, for example, and we're going to do as many rows as you need to get across to the other shoulder. So if it's for yourself, you just measure it across your back there, or if it's a gift for a bride that you know, just make sure to measure it against that person. That's always kind of the easiest way I like to make garments if I'm making it for somebody specific, or at least get them to send you the measurement across if you can't get to them physically. Okay, so we're going to go, I'm just going to take you back to row 1 just to show you how we begin again, row 1. So because we're going to go back up to double crochet stitches, we need to chain 3 this time. 1, 2, and 3, and that creates the height of our double crochet stitch. Now you might be saying, but Karen, you said chain 2 additionally when we started off the first row. Yes, because the third chain was actually the bottom of that stitch. So once we chained the number of chains we needed, the last chain was actually part of that height of the double crochet. I hope that makes sense. So because we are working on top of stitches, we now need the full 3 stitches to create height. Now, some people do believe in only chaining 2 for the height of their double crochet stitches. It's just a personal preference. I do a chain of 3 because I find for me, I like that it sits nicely It creates a good height to sit next to a double crochet stitch. Hopefully that makes sense. If it's a lot of double talk, don't worry about it. Just follow along because it will work out exactly as I'm doing. So we've chained 3. We'll turn our work. And so remember that this first spacing here belongs to the base of this stitch. And then we're going to work into the very next stitch. So because we're doing double crochets, remember that we're yarning over first, inserting into that stitch. You'll yarn over to pull through. Yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops, and then yarn over and pull through the second 2 loops. Don't worry if this is a little wonky right now. Again, as we work subsequent rows, that'll straighten out. So now you're off to the races. We just do 1 double crochet into each stitch all the way across. And as long as you always have 20 stitches, which is the stitch count I need in my case, you should be a-okay. Now the person I'm making this for is similar in height to myself. So that's how I know. I measured based on my elbow and my shoulders. So I know that this is going to be okay. This is also the type of project that kind of is a one-size-fits-all for the most part. Because it is meant to be just a wrap, a specific tight fit is not all that important, but we want to get the general feel of a nice fit. Okay, so just do a few here. So now you can see the differences in the texture. So you see this row of double crochets, this is technically the back of that row. See how the front is? So now when I turn my work, see, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to see different textures of the stitches. Okay, so that's row 1, row 2 and row 3. We're back to row 1, 2 and 3. And the next time we go to row 1, we'll see this texture come back up again to the front, I guess we'll call this side. Okay, guys, this is pretty much it. You're practicing your double crochets and single crochets. So you're just going to repeat again, row 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3. So row 1 is double crochets, row 2 and row 3 are single crochet stitches. So we are working this way across your bride's back. So good luck with that, and I'll see you shortly. All right, my darlings. So here we are. I've got my rectangle all done. Now, for some of you, this may just look like another scarf, which absolutely you can make this a scarf. This is the beauty about a design like this. It's super simple and you can use it for many different things. Now, you'll notice that on this side, there's actually a definite color change. And what I was trying to do, because they've got this coloring that just kind of, it's on a gradient where it kind of goes from dark pink to light. What I wanted to do is I was trying to aim for having the light pink come around the front, but in the end, so I cut off my yarn here at some point, and then I started from the other end, but you can see that it's much more noticeable. So if I were to do this again, I wouldn't have bothered. I would have just let it kind of go on a gradient and eventually go light, because it is super pretty the way it does go from the dark pink to the light. I can't speak today. In any case, that is always up to you. It's your absolute preference, whatever you think is going to look better, feel better. So the length of mine is 42 inches in total, or 106 centimeters. So I did the repeat 24 times. So that means I did 1 row of double crochets and 2 rows of single crochets, and I repeated that 24 times. Now, what I did is I ended up on both sides. I made sure to end up with the single crochet rounds. So technically, I guess you could say I repeated it 24 and a half times, or rounds. I keep saying rounds. So, and I'm very happy with that. So when I wrapped it around, I had enough space that I could kind of go over this way. Now, this is where you can decide how you want your closure to be. Now I have a specific, mine was that specific idea, but you can actually just simply put a button and close it this way because she can wear it on an angle like that, okay? And that would be really, really pretty as well. I am going to go ahead and show you how I'm going to basically create that little bunch in the center, just like that. Love how that looks. And but before we get to that, what I want to do, because we have to also talk about creating the trim with our fur, right? One more thing I forgot to mention, how could I forget this, is you are going to need, if you'd like to make the trim around your wrap, a little bit of some of this. I use the faux fur yarn, which just feels absolutely divine. And this is the Loops and Threads fur, basically is what it's called. And these come in 70-yard balls, or sorry, 100 grams, which is 3.5 ounces, and you get 70 yards or 64 meters. You don't have to add this add-on, but again, because it is for a February bride and we want to make sure they stay nice and cozy, I thought this really beautiful trim would be nice with it. Of course, I didn't find any in a pink tone, but no matter. I think this is going to come out beautiful all the same. So you won't necessarily use the whole thing, but I'm sure you can find other projects you can use this for. And in fact, I'm giving you a little sneak peek on another one I've already started, which will be coming up in a much future tutorial, also for the bride. So here we go. So before we get to that, I haven't tied off because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do one round, meaning all the way around, of single crochets. So this means that at this point, I am going to be working into the sides of these stitches. Okay, so I know that I've done my repeat 24 rows. So times by 3 sets of rows should give me about 72, 73, 74 rows of stitches if I include the extra 2 single crochet rows. Now, for the most part, again, things like this are just kind of going by your gut and how you feel. The general rule is when you're working into the sides of stitches, you can usually fit 1 stitch into the side of each single crochet stitch. They're generally equal in height and width. When you are working into the side of a double crochet, the most general rule is to put 2 stitches into the side of the double crochet, and that usually sits very nicely with regards to that length. So that is what I'm going to do. And you know, with this beautiful chenille yarn, it's just sometimes it can be a little tricky to see, but you know, this yarn is pretty easy to feel your way through. So I would just feel my way through. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start at the corner here, and I'm going to go all the way around, and I'm basically going to do all the way around the edge. Okay, and then I'm going to go down my short side, and then I'm going to go along the bottom side, and basically one all the way around. So I'm just going to get you started. It's really, really straightforward. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to find that very last stitch that I single crocheted out of, and I'm just going to simply insert my hook, and I'm going to do another single crochet into that same stitch. Okay, so you can already see it's allowing it to round out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it one more time into that same stitch. So right back into that same stitch. And again, if you can't see it, so there it is there, but sometimes you just have to feel it out. Insert, pull through, and there you go. So your corners, yeah, that's great. Your corners generally should get 3 stitches into the same stitch, and that 3 allows you to kind of curve the bend there, and now we are definitely working our way across the long side. So let's do a few together here. I have got one more row of single crochets. Now, because we did 3, it's easy for it to get hidden there, but it is sitting. So this is the last stitch. And here it is right here. So that's the next single crochet row. So I'm going to just insert my hook and place a single crochet. I just want to keep it nice and relaxed. So now you can see that it went around the bend very nicely, very evenly. Okay. Now the next row I can tell is a double crochet row. So see how the post is a little bit longer? So what I'm going to do is I am going to find somewhere around the top here that I want to insert into. And what I'm trying to do is I just like the idea of kind of catching more than one loop. So these are the loops that are going through. I might have to help it through here. There we go. Okay, pull through, single crochet. So that's in the middle of the stitch. And now I'm just going to go to the base of the stitch right here. I'm going to insert my hook and single crochet. And when you're working into the sides of the stitch, sometimes you have to just take the hook out and set it down and see if it's sitting nicely. So I'm pretty happy with that. If it starts to kind of buckle this way, then you know, okay, maybe you've gone too far over, or you need to, or if it starts kind of buckling like that, that means you've done them too close together. If it starts to bunch, it means you're too far out. If it starts to buckle, it means you've done too close. But I think you get the gist. Again, use your judgment and what you like to see. Okay, so I now know my next one is a single crochet row. And I'm just going to feel my way out and insert through there. And there we have it. Another single crochet row, feeling my way through there. Just like that. There we go. And you can already see that it is basically giving this a much nicer finishing around the edge. And not only that, because we're going to add another trim, or we're going to use another yarn for the trim, right, when we reintroduce our fur here, it's just going to make it a lot easier to find stitches to work into. And most especially because this yarn here, which feels divine, it is a little bit of a pain a doodle to find your stitches. It is extremely difficult to see. And you'll hear me talk all about this when we work on a future tutorial with this yarn that I have planned for you. It is really, really a bummer to try and find your stitches in this. So that's why using it for trim is fantastic, because you only need a little bit of it. And that is why with us making a finishing row here, it'll make it that much easier to at least find the stitches in our project. So enough of that. What I'm going to get you guys to do is continue on just doing a single crochet all the way around until you're done. I'm going to meet back up with you right back to the beginning of our ending row. So remember, we went around the bend here. When you come back and you do all 3 sides, I'm not going to go and do the 4th side, only because I like the idea of finishing off here, and then we're going to just do a slip stitch join, and then we're going to weave in our ends. So hopefully it'll just look nice and tidy and even. So go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you around the bend. Okay, once you've done your border all the way around the edges, I just wanted to show you my very last stitch. So this is now the beginning of the edge here, where we came out around the side. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into the side of that very first stitch, and that's going to finish off our round. And then I am just going to pull that out. So I've already cut out my yarn, or I've already fastened off. And now I'm just going to do a little slip stitch join method that some of you have seen me do before. So I'm just going to grab my darning needle. Okay, and so with my darning needle, I've fed my yarn through. And now what I want to do is I just want to see, that's where the next top of the next stitch would be. So I am just going to feed the yarn through there, just like that. And now I'm going to come back in through the top of this last single crochet that I did. And I'm just going to feed it through like that. So what that does is it makes it look like it's just another stitch. And I'm sure those of you that have seen some of my other projects, you know, a lot of times when I work in the round, I like using this join. And then it kind of makes it look very uniform around the way there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sew in, weave in this end here, and then we will move on to the next section. Okay, so once we've done the border, so we've got now a regular stitch going all the way around. Your project will look something like this. And right now, many people may just feel like it just looks like a really fluffy scarf, which in fact, it's a little bit on the short side for a scarf, but you could use this design to create a fluffy scarf. Just get that out of the way. So now what we want to do is we are going to fold this. So this is where the front of our wrap meets. So you see, now you can kind of see the effect we're going for. But what we want to do is we want to actually bunch this in to create a gathering in the center. Okay. I'm going to just pick up my yarn again, and I'm going to start on this side. It doesn't really matter which way because, again, the wrap is reversible, except it won't be after this. So we're going to do a series of decreases along each of the short sides. So we're going to put a slip knot back onto our hook. Okay. And we're just going to start right. So each corner should have 3 stitches in. Each corner should have 3 stitches inside that first stitch there. Now again, sometimes with the chenille it's going to be a little tricky to see, so I just want you to gauge. And I'm pretty much feeling like that is the corner stitch. So I'm going to insert my hook there. And I'm going to slip stitch to join. And in fact, what I'm going to do, just like that. Now I'm going to chain 1, and into that same stitch, I'm going to do a single crochet. And I'm going to weave this end in later, and you're going to see why in a moment. So now we're going to do a series of decrease stitches, but it's going to be a little bit different than the traditional decrease of stitching 2 stitches together. We're actually going to do 3 stitches together. So we're still going to use a single crochet. We're going to insert our hook into the next stitch, pull up a loop. We're going to go into the next stitch, insert our hook, and pull up a loop. And now we're going to go into the next one. So we're basically pulling up into 3 stitches. You're going to have 4 loops on your hook. Now we're going to yarn over and pull through all of those loops. So it just creates a little bit of a bunching there, and that's what we want. And we're going to continue doing that all the way down. So now we're going to go into the next non-worked stitch, insert, pull up a loop, into the next one, pull up a loop, and into the next one, pull up a loop. Okay, now notice I'm keeping these fairly snug. I don't want to stretch the loops too high. I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 4. Now after the second time of me doing that, you should be able to already feel and see that it's buckling. That is exactly what we want. Okay, so you're going to do that going all the way to the end. And by my calculations, I will have basically 1 stitch left at the end that's free, and I'm just going to single crochet into that. So it may vary depending on how many stitches across you did. But that's basically it. You're just going to gather 3 stitches into 1. Okay, so I've gone to the end, and I'm just going to turn this around so you guys can see the effect. So you can see now that it is definitely bunched in towards the center. So that's exactly what we want. Now what we're going to do is we are going to snip our yarn, but we're going to leave a little bit of a long tail. I would say about 16 inches or so. And just going to snip our yarn like that. And then right here, I'm just going to pull that through so it fastens it off. Now you want to be careful sometimes that it's not too tight, because with chenille yarn, as is sometimes with velvet yarn, if you're pulling it through too tightly, all the fibers can come loose. So you just want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So you've got something that looks like that. So it's buckling, it's bunching in there, and it's perfecto. Now you'll notice that there's going to be these little gaps where we did that final looping through, and we're going to use those gaps to now sew this bunch together so that it'll be secured nicely just like that to create that puckering. Okay, and so we are going to bring our darning needle back in again, and we're just going to feed it through there. And now, so I now know that I want this part to be the front. So I'm just going to go in through here, and any place I see that gap. So this one, I'm going to go into this one here. I'm just going to feed the yarn up, and then into the next gap, I'm going to feed the yarn down. Okay, so very similar to a lot of times the way we cinch in the tops of hats and things like that, or the bottoms of bags. So up, the next one is down, and then the last one, I'm going to come into the corner here and go up. Okay, so now it's really solidifying the shape. So I'm just going to cinch that a little bit, just like that. Again, gently but firmly, because I want to get these two closed in together so it looks nice like that. And in fact, what I am going to do, since this tail is here, is I am going to knot it to the tail. And then it will be really nice and secure. And I'll give it a couple of knots there. Okay, so now you should definitely be able to see that nice pucker effect we're going for. So that's kind of the center gathering there, just like that. Now we do want to have a little bit of an opening. Now I'm going to use my a satin ribbon again, but some of you may choose to fasten on a closure, like a clip closure. For something like this, I would like to find something vintage, but I just haven't come across anything that I've liked. So if you just kind of want that hook and latch closure, you can do that too. I still like the look of the satin ribbon, especially if you want a little bit more of a vintage tone or motif to the bridal project. That's kind of what I'm going for. So in order to make sure that I've got a place to put in, this is why I wanted you to leave the long tail. We're just going to create a little opening here for it. And so I'm just going to take that off the darning needle. And so what I'm going to do, so you can see here that it's just got this nice bunch at the top, and this is where I just want to work in a little loop here. And what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to change out my 8mm hook to a 6.5. I'm just going to go down a little bit just so that it'll make it easier to work in this tight area here. Okay, so I've got my 6.5mm hook, and just where the knot is here, just going to find a little spacing in here, and I'm going to pull up a loop, and I'm just going to create a chain. So I'm going to maybe do 3. I don't want it to be too loose. And then I'm going to find a spot somewhere at the other end of the gathering. I don't want it to be too far away. I'm just going to find a stitch there, and I'm going to slip stitch it shut. So you can see how there's a nice little opening there. And you might need to experiment with this. Maybe you're going to chain 4, or you're going to chain, a lesser amount, but I'm just putting my finger through there, and I think that's going to be just the right amount. And then I think I'm going to slip stitch into the next one, and then pull it through, and I'm done. Okay, so that's, now if you wanted to as well, you could just use this as a buttonhole, and then on your other one, put a really beautiful button on that side too. And I think that will look just as pretty. So there's lots of different options, different ways you can put your touch to this. But this is kind of the one I'm going for. So I am literally going to do this on the other side. I'm going to bunch this in the same way, and I'm going to create a loop also the same way because I'm putting a ribbon on both sides. Okay. So go ahead, and so I'm just going to pull out so you can see the difference. So this one has not been done yet. And so this is just kind of bunched in nicely there. So you can see that effect there. And then we've got our little loop here that later on we're going to attach our ribbon to. Okay. But for now, I'm going to let you finish the second side. Make sure to include your loop or whatever spacing you want to leave for your closure. And then we're going to talk about bringing in our fur trim all the way around. That's going to be super fun. So go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you back for the trim. Okay, guys, so our wrap is looking like this. So now we've got the center, it has a nice bunch in it, and we've made both of them have our loops there for our ribbon. And now it's time to bring back in our fur trim. So I just wanted to add a nice little cozy trim to this wrap. It is a lovely cozy chenille, but it is a February bride's wrap. So I wanted to add just a little something extra to just give it a bit more of a cozy feel. So we are going to add some trim with this beautiful fur yarn. And again, this is by Loops and Threads. So here we go. Okay, so I'm going to start on one of my ends here so I can see where the loop for my ribbon is, and I'm going to start somewhere beside it. And I'm just going to take my yarn, and I'm going to create a slip knot. Now, one thing about this yarn is when you're using it on a project of its own, it can be very tricky to see your stitches, but you just have to be patient. Okay, so the good thing is we're working into the chenille where we can kind of see. So I'm going to insert the hook right about, whoops, right about there, if I can find a loop to get it through. And I think that's probably where I wove in my ends somewhere around there. So there we go. Okay, so I'm going to slip stitch to join. I'm going to bring that through and then bring it through again. So you should kind of already see how it can be a little bit tricky to see where to go. I'm going to try and work over this tail here. So for now, all we're doing is just going to place one single crochet into each stitch all the way around the border of the complete wrap, okay? So I've slip stitched to join, so I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm just going to go into the very next available stitch. And for this one, it's going to be right there. And I'm just going to pull through. So when you're working it, it feels okay. But now to see where the stitch is, you actually have to feel it out. So I can feel that there is a spot there where the chain 1 was. Okay, so I'm going to go into the very next stitch, insert, pull up, and single crochet. Okay, so I'm going to do a couple of rounds around here, but now I would feel this out. Do one round and see how you like it. Like you might only want just a little bit of a touch of this. I want something a little bit more lush, so I'm probably going to do a few rounds, but going into the second round means you're really going to have to feel for where your stitches are, because as you can see, we really can't see where they are. Okay, but for now, it should be fairly straightforward to just go into the very next stitch available and single crochet. And of course, you can always just leave this part of your wrap out. And maybe you wanted to make your wrap a little bit thicker. That's okay too. It's all art, people. But I really like the idea of adding this, this embellishment, this bit of trim here. I think it's going to just add that little extra something for the February bride. Okay, so I've just done a few here, and I just want to, I love that. So you can, I'm just going to set that down. So hopefully you can see the idea we're going for here is to create this really pretty soft trim. Actually, I really like how that's coming up against the pink. Part of me wasn't sure, but I actually really like it. So guys, go ahead and do your trim all the way around. You're going to come up through here. And when you get to this loop, what I want to try and do is just go around and over it so that the loop stays obvious, but the trim will just go around the front there like that. In fact, I'll meet up with you here just to kind of take you through it. Okay, so just do for now one single crochet all the way around the top. I'll meet you here, and then you can finish your rounds there. And we're almost done. Okay, so you can see how the trim is just coming along so beautifully there. So now, whoops, we're just coming around to the area where we have our opening. And I really want to go around the top here. Yeah, that's what I want to do. Oops, I lost my loop here. So this is where it gets interesting, because now we are, there we go. Actually, it's interesting because, oh, there it is. So again, so this is very interesting to work with. So I'm coming around the edge here, and this is where I sewed up some of my ends here. So basically, I'm just going to feel my way through and just try and find a good spot to insert my hook. Like maybe right about there, just to make my way across. Okay, and basically it is kind of like feeling your way through the dark. So there's a little opening here, and that's probably where we cinched in our end there. I'm just going to gingerly, because I don't want to pull any of the other loops, and single crochet just like that. Okay, now I'm going to go around here, and actually that is exactly what I'm doing, is I'm going around where we cinched it in. And I apologize if it's hard to see. I mean, it's chenille yarn, it's fur yarn, but I am basically just feeling my way around. I think I'm going to go up here, the edge here, and truly I'm just feeling my way around. What I'm trying to do is, see, there's the loop. Just want to go around to get back up to here to work into regular loops again. So I'm just basically feeling my way through. Here we go. So I'm pulling up. And there you have it. See, there's the loop for our ribbon later. And so I've just made sure that the lining came around and around the front. And I'm pretty happy with that. So now, right there, I can find my first loop, and I continue on. Okay, so now I'm back into stitches. Yay! Okay, and you just continue on one single crochet. Now, I'm just going to pull this up here so you can see so far what the lining looks like. I really like that, actually. So see, now it just adds this extra layer of texture. So you can tell it's you know, cozy and soft, but that little bit of fur trim is going to look amazing. And I myself am going to do at least 2 rounds, if not 3, of course, depending on my yarn and depending on how I like the look of it. But I think I want something a bit more lush around the edge. So I'm going to set you loose. I'm going to finish off this round. And if you decide to be finished here, you're going to, remember, here's the loop. You're going to go around the same way we did the other way. And then just feel your way into slip stitching here. Fasten off, and maybe you can tie these 2 ends together and then sew in your end. If you're going to continue on for another couple of rounds like I am, really, you're going to have to just go slow. Don't be in a rush. And really and truly just feel your way through. So there we go. So there is a stitch there. I'm just doing that to show you where it is. And so then I'm going to feel my way through. There's the next stitch. And basically, you just see, if I pull up the fur bits, you can see where the stitch went in. So you can work in between that. And basically, that is it. You may... Listen, you may skip a stitch. You may add an extra stitch. That is the thing with working with this fur yarn. So don't be in a rush. Take your time. It all depends on the look that you're going for, but look at how gorgeous that is going to look. So I really recommend you enjoy the process, take your time, and it's going to come out fabulous. So I'm going to go ahead and do my trim, and then I'm going to meet you back here to talk about the final touch with the satin ribbon. Okay, so I did my 3 rows around the trim here, and I'm really happy with that thickness. You can do more if you like, but I just wanted it to be just a little add-on so you can see just how sweet that it just, I don't know, I just really love this little added detail. It just makes it that much more cozier, and I love the bunching in here. Just gives it that really sweet stole-like look. Okay, so this is where your front closures are going to be. As you can see, I went around that little loop we created over here like that. And the final touch is just to add our closure. And for me, it's going to be a ribbon. So I've gone ahead and cut up some of my satin ribbon here. And you may notice that I've doubled it up. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to fit it through the loop here, and then I'm going to tie it. I'm going to tie a knot here so that there's 2 of these strands, we'll call it, in each loop. So I've got 2. And in case you are wondering how long I made it, I haven't actually measured it, but what I did is I just kind of gauged kind of how long I wanted it. And I wanted it to drape a little bit longer because more than likely we're going to do a bow there. But I will measure this and let you know the exact measurements because I know many of you like to know. So fold it in half. My ribbons are 24 inches or 61 centimeters. So if you're cutting the piece all in one shot, that would be 48 inches or 122 centimeters. Okay. And I've, again, cut it on an angle here for just kind of a nice effect. You can add on a tassel or a pom-pom if you like. And if you want to do that, we also have a couple quick little tutorials on how to do pom-poms and tassels. Again, I am going to keep mine nice and plain. So let's get this on our wrap. Okay, so we're going to start by taking one of these ribbons, and we just want to find where our loop is, which is right there. Don't you just love that? I love the feel of this. I'm going to want to wear this myself. So I'm going to take my ribbon and I'm just going to feed it through. Just nice and easy like that. And what I want to do is just make sure that my 2 ends eventually match up nicely like that. So I'm just going to make sure they're nice and even. There we go. So I know that that's my center point. And just to secure it, I'm actually just going to knot it so that I know it's going to stay in place. Sometimes maybe the bride's taking the wrap off and setting it down. You don't want these ribbons to come loose, right? So just one is enough. And again, that's going to be on the inside, just like that. So there you have it. That's it, guys. That's all there is to it. So we're going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to find that loop. There it is, right there. And I'm going to feed my ribbon through till I've got to my center point. And I test that out by putting the outside ends together and then just making sure you can do that. Now I know it's in the center, and I'm going to tie a securing knot there. And guys, we are done. This is, I would say this is one of the easier, if not easiest, bridal crochet projects that we'll probably do. But the really neat thing is it looks much more complicated than it is. So here we go. We've got our closure now. And so when you wrap it around, now you're going to secure it by tying a bow. And you can actually just use one of these if you want. I'm going to use two to bring them together. And of course, this is always a personal preference. I just love how that creates this beautiful drape there. And then I'm just going to do a really simple bow. So with the loop there, and actually for this one, I'm going to do it this way, just to kind of keep it nice and even, and also for nice photographs. So I have two loops here, and then I'm just going to tuck one inside the other and pull. Okay, and then you just adjust it how you like. And this, of course, would be more likely for photographs and things like that. You want to just make sure it's really nice and visible and the loop sits nicely. And there you have it. Look at that. Now, if you really want to fluff this up, you can take this extra layer here and just kind of do that. And that's the nice thing about having two layers, is you can really beef up your bow game. Yeah, I love that. Look at how pretty, guys. And that's it. This is February's bride. It is the everlasting wrap. Isn't that pretty? I have really enjoyed, I know I say that in a lot of tutorials, but these bridal series crochet projects have been so fun, and it's really interesting the things you can come up with as bridal add-ons, or even making lovely gifts for someone special that you know that's getting married. And I just love how that closure turned out, and this nice gathering. And it is so easy to make. If you're new to crochet and you see this and you think I could never do this, absolutely not. You can so do this, and it's a great way to practice your basic stitches, the double crochet and the single crochet, and you're off to the races. So guys, please, I'm begging you, I want to see how yours turned out. So definitely tag me on Instagram when you finished your wraps, and I would love to see it. And we're at the stitch sessions _ between the three words. And please do reach out. I am so excited to see how yours came out. If you have any questions in the meantime, just drop me a comment in the comment box down below. And or you can always reach me directly at info@crochetcrafty.com. Thank you so much for coming along on today's tutorial, and make sure you press that subscribe button if you haven't already, and that way you'll never miss when we upload every Wednesday. Usually in the morning around 10 a.m. I upload a brand new video. So come along with us. Thank you so much for joining me. Have an amazing day. Happy crocheting, and take care.